How it's supposed to feel.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 2023 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that audio recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we move to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. Welcome everyone. I declare the meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during the meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member. That's me. And I do note that we are in caretaker period at the moment, so any questions from elected members, please keep them succinct, brief and on point. Item 4 is attendances. Item 4.1 is apologies, of which there is nil this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, of which there is nil this evening. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.5 as I serve on the board of Amaroo Care Services Inc. Amaroo also provide residential aged care services, albeit in a different catchment area. Councillor Nick Warland has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.5 as Imogen was a client of a former employer for part of the duration of my employment there. Councillors, does anyone else have any declarations of interest that they wish to make this evening? And that's a no. In that case, we're moving on to item 6, which is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice. That's nil. Item 6.2 is public question time itself. And I now open public question time at 3 minutes past 6 p.m. We have received one written submission prior to tonight's meeting, so I'd like to invite Mr. Barry Drake of South Perth to the microphone. Welcome. Mr. Drake, I do see that you've got quite a bit of a preamble on question 3 that I've got here. I'm going to ask that when you get to question 3, you just go straight to the question because it is for public question time, it's not for statements. But with that, we look forward to your first question.
So, Mr. Mayor, you're assuming the people who are interested and listening on YouTube, who may be voting at the new council elections, surely they have an interest and they have a reason to...
Mr. Drake, I'm going to stop you there. We've been through this several times together. Public question time is for public questions. It is not for statements. If you don't abide by the rules like everyone else, and I do have to be fair to everyone, I will have to shut you down.
Yeah,
please don't make me do that.
Okay, all right. The question's about the underground power, the way the city has charged some of the landowners in the South Perth Hurlingham area for underground power, that is flat owners. Question 1. My question to the elected members, i.e. the councillors, and in fact you, Greg, the Mayor, do you agree with the response given to me and other flat owners by the City of Perth officer at the underground power information session on South Perth and Hurlingham project area held on Wednesday, the 25th of May, 2022, last year, that I and other flat owners should put up our tenants' rent to cover the much higher network charge than we as flat owners should have to pay?
Thank you for your question. Mr. Drake, just FYI, the questions are asked to the city and I, as presiding member, determine who answers the question. So I'm going to direct that question to Mr. Adams.
So, Mr Drake, as I've previously indicated to you, I find it doubtful that a city officer would have made that statement to you. What you choose to charge your tenants is between you and your tenants.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Your second question, please, Mr Drake.
But the question was,
No,
Does
Mr
the
Drake, please ask your second
agree?
question. You don't get to argue the toss. Please
Okay,
ask your
all right.
second question.
second question number 2. Why has the city charged the owners of granny flats less per dwelling unit for underground power than the owners of blocks of flats on a single title in the South Perth Hurlingham project area?
Thank you. Mr Adams?
Again, Mr Drake, I answered this question at the July 2023 Ordinary Council meeting. The charges are per unit or dwelling and are in accordance with the council resolution.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And Mr Drake, your third question, and please, straight to the question, no preamble, please.
Going straight to the question doesn't make any sense.
I assure you Mr Adams will understand what you're asking.
Yeah, but he will, but what about everybody else?
Mr Drake, I've been very patient. Please just ask the question.
My question is, why did you tell the Ombudsman that that this matter was before the tribunal when you know that it had been withdrawn on the 9th of February 2023, 9th of February this year, that I made an application for the city of I made an application for the State Administrative Tribunal, the SAT, to investigate the charges, but I withdrew the matter, and now the city has told the Ombudsman that it is still before the SAT, and the SAT didn't
Mr.
make a
Drake,
ruling on it.
Please ask the question.
Okay. So why did the city tell the Ombudsman that the matter was still before the SAT when the city knew that it had been withdrawn?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
We have no record of city staff providing any information to the Ombudsman regarding this matter. As indicated to you previously, should you wish to progress the matter further, the correct avenue is through SAT.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Mr Drake, for your
I've
questions.
got a letter here from
Mr
the
Drake,
Ombudsman.
your 3 questions have been asked and answered. Please resume your seat.
Well, that's a lie.
Mr
That's
Drake,
an absolute lie.
please
Excuse me,
resume your seat.
Mr Drake, I have not told a lie, and I want that on the record, because we have no record of providing that information to the Ombudsman.
Is this letter correct?
Mr Drake, please resume your seat. Thank you. I'm now going to check in with the governance team and ask if there's any questions in the tray. No, there is not. Okay. In that case, I now close public question time at 9 minutes past 6 p.m. We now move on to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held on 22 August 2023. So I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 22 August 2023 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Councillor Brenda Abrandis to move, thank you. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Manolis, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And we're waiting on one more vote. Oh, no, there it is. That was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move to item 7.2, notes of briefing. I'm going to call for someone to move that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops, and 7.2.2, council agenda briefing, the 19th of September 2023. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillor Manolis to second. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No? In that case, I'll declare it carried. We move on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions, of which there's nil this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's nil this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations. And there were no deputations heard at the council agenda briefing held 19 September 2023. That brings us to item 9, which is the method of dealing with agenda business. I'll now seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the September Council agenda briefing.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean the officer recommendation will be adopted as is without discussion or amendment. There is one item that's been withdrawn this evening. That is item 10.4.2, which is entitled Monthly Financial Statements, August 2023, and Carry Forward Budget Adjustments. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required. Councillors, does anyone wish to withdraw any other item this evening for discussion? That's a no. Oh, Councillor Choi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got a question in relation to item 10.3.5, proposed 11 aged or dependent persons dwellings, lot 3604, number 80 Henley Street, Como.
All right, so you want that withdrawn, Councillor Choi?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, so we're withdrawing items 10.3.5 and 10.4.2. Councillors, now call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. They are item 10.3.1, E-quote 4 of 2023, provision of truck-mounted sweeping services. Item 10.3.2, RFT 7 of 2023, provision of watering and planting services. Item 10.3.3, draft amended local planning policy P301, family daycare and child daycare centres advertising. Item 10.3.4, draft amended local planning policy P308, signs advertising. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments, August 2023. Item 10.5.1, audit register progress, quarter 4. And item 10.5.2, 2022-2023, annual financial statements, external audit interim report. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Worland, thank you. Councillor Brenda Abrandis to second. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. In that case, I'll declare that those items have all been passed. So, for the benefit of those listening via YouTube, all of those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion, the first of which is item 10.3.5, proposed 11 aged or dependent persons dwellings, lot 3604, number 80 Henley Street in Como. We do have an officer recommendation before us. Haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Worland, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Russell, thank you. Councillor Worland, the floor is yours. All right, thank you. Councillor Russell, anything to say? No. Councillor Choi, I know you've got a question there.
Yes, thank you. Just a question for the relevant officer in relation to universal access design. If I couldn't really see much about that, if anything, in the report, and so I just had a query on that, please.
Ms. Shaw, can I send that in your direction?
Oh yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to be considered an aged or dependent person's dwelling under State Planning Policy 7.3, which is the R codes, they need to comply with Australian Standard 4299, which effectively provides for internal dwelling layouts that meet the requirements of that standard. So they have wider corridor widths, accessible toilet facilities and the like within the dwellings themselves. The detailed widths and dimensions of those features would be included in the working drawings for the building permit.
Councillors, does anyone have any further questions? Does anyone wish to speak against the item? In that case, Councillor Worland, anything to say by way of winding up? I'll simply put the item to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening. That is item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, August 2023, and carry forward budget adjustments. An absolute majority is required for this item. I haven't received any alternative motions or amended motions. There is an officer recommendation before us. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Worland, thank you. Anyone to second? Councillor De Souza, thank you. Councillor Worland, anything to say? No. Councillor De Souza? No. Does anyone oppose this item? No. In that case, I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare it carried unanimously, which satisfies the requirement for an absolute majority. That brings us to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. Does anyone have a leave of absence application that they'd like to submit this evening? That's a no. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. That's nil. Item 13 is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. That's nil. Item 13.2 is questions from members. Are there any questions from members this evening? Councillor De Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received a call today from Margaret Thomas, who's the CEO of Retirees WA, and it's in regards to their new building at 25 Mount Henry Road, Salter Point. From what I understood, the city has not yet received an occupation permit, and they were seeking, I guess, an extension to that for fear that they would not have basically a building to work out of. Fairly small staff, 9 people. So is there any way for the city to grant that, or any other options that can be investigated?
Ms. Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city has responded to the applicant for that, advising that we could provide an extension until no later than Monday, the 9th of October. The reason that the city is not prepared to grant a further extension is that the building's currently being occupied without the required occupancy permit under the Building Act, and would otherwise constitute a safety risk for the occupants if no further assessments undertaken.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Brenda O'Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few questions just with regard to compliance and more governance around process. Just if the administration could please advise if the 2023 electoral gift register has been updated. So when was it last updated? And does that reflect all the donations that are currently outstanding in the register as of today?
Mr. Hindle, can I send that one your way?
Through the Mayor, I believe it was updated on the 22nd of September and it's up to date.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hindle. I've got a few further questions with regard to the same matter. So probably just more of an explanation with regard to the governance requirement. So if the city could please explain, if there was a situation where there was an electoral gift donation that was made and it was disclosed by a donor but a potential recipient didn't disclose it, would it still be on the register?
Mr. Hindle?
Through the Mayor, can you just repeat that question again?
Yeah, certainly. So if a donor made a donation as an electoral gift donation because it's connected with the election, if they actually made a donation but the recipient may not have very well asked for the donation, would it still be recorded and disclosed on the electoral gift register?
Mr. Hindle?
Through the Mayor, it's on the candidate to make the disclosure. So if a candidate receives a donation, it's on them to make the disclosure. Otherwise, we're not aware of it.
Okay, thank you. So that means if a donor actually made a disclosure separately, but a candidate didn't make a disclosure, it would still not appear on the register?
Mr. Hindle?
If we receive disclosures, they will appear on the register. We usually receive one from the candidate, and then a second one from the donor.
Okay, thank you. So on that basis, I'm just considering, you know, if we obviously had donors that were third parties, which might not be known to any of us personally, making donations, would the city inquire as to whether a electoral gift donation had been made?
This is getting pretty speculative. If you've got some questions around these items that we actually probably need to consider them, if you could put them in writing and we'll answer them.
Okay. I just have two specific ones though that are actually quite relevant. So the first one is just with regard to a donation that was made by Mr. J. Olson in Como and also Mr. J. Culver in Bunbury. Clearly electoral gift donations that were actually made, obviously to the benefit of some candidates to the detriment of others. So is the city aware of those, and is the city inquiring into the value of those?
Through the Mayor, the city receives the disclosures from the candidates. We put it on the website straight away. I'm not sure what you're alluding to with that one.
Thank you very much. But is the city actually aware of those two pieces of publication?
The registers are publicly registered as a public document. We'd have to check that they're there, but I believe that they are.
Thank you very much. I'll put these in writing.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Manolis.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to say a few words, if that was...
No, Councillor Manolis, it's question time. It's not for making statements. Do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. It was, I just wanted to, being my last meeting, and I haven't re-nominated, I would just like to say a few words, that's all.
I'll allow it on this occasion. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It has been a privilege to serve as a Midpoint Ward councillor for the past 8 years, and I wish to thank the community for their support. I also wish to thank the team of employees at the City of South Perth, including many of the volunteers and my fellow councillors and mayor. I've served with a group of excellent, capable and experienced councillors. My time as a councillor has been a learning experience filled with challenges and satisfaction. I wish all the candidates every success and hope their time on council will be rewarding. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Manolis. Well spoken. Councillor Borland, I am conscious this is your last meeting as well. Is there anything that you'd like to say?
Not so far as a statement, Mayor, but I do have a question, if that's okay.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Can the city confirm that the 2024 Australia Day celebrations and citizenship ceremony will take place on the 26th of January, or are other dates under consideration?
Who should I direct that to? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're having further discussions at this point in time as to those arrangements before we go out to procuring the different suppliers. So we'll be providing some further updates to elected members in that respect.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I was just going to signal that the question I was going to ask, I think I will send through because it probably conforms with what Mr Bradford said about speculative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Quitland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. During the last council election, I noticed that there were signs and call flutes that had been nailed or screwed to verge trees in the city of South Perth. And when I was in Vic Park over the weekend, I noticed that the Yes campaign had been using roofing screws to screw them into verge trees in that town. I was just wondering whether, and I've sent some photos through to the city to show what I'm talking about. I was wondering whether or not campaign material or the referendum campaign material being screwed or nailed into verge trees in South Perth has occurred that the city is aware of. And that's the first question. The second question is, in Vic Park, they're using galvanised screws or roofing screws. Does the city know whether or not galvanised material is likely to cause damage or poison verge trees?
Who should I send that to? Ms Amprimo?
Director Adams, I think, can answer it.
Mr Adams.
So I can answer the first part of the question around election signage. So election signage that is on city land can be removed by us. A lot of the signage you're referring to is probably on main roads land and on land not controlled by us. However, with regard to screwing it to trees, I'd have to pass to Director Amprimo to answer that one about whether it affects the health of the trees or not.
Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, we wouldn't encourage anyone to screw anything into the tree because it could cause damage. Whether galvanised nails or like copper nails, I would have to look into that and let you know.
And I don't think we're aware of any, we haven't had any instances of that reported to us that I'm aware of.
Next set of questions was to the CEO, and that's whether or not the CEO is able to give the council an update in respect of the derelict buildings in Lockhart Street and what the city has done about those sites and the complaints that have been made about it. And second question in respect of that, has the city been able to place a working mobile CCTV camera outside those derelict buildings where there's been vagrants and squatters, noting that the council cancelled the crime capital budget last year, including the mobile CCTV replacement?
Ms Shaw, can I send that your way?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sorry, did you just mention that the CCTV trailer had been cancelled? No?
It was in the budget last year.
Yes, yes. So in terms of the procurement of the CCTV trailer, we're just fine-tuning some IT issues related to it, but it should be operational by mid to late October, and then we can take requests for its deployment.
And in respect of the derelict sites on Lockhart Street?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would need to look into that in more detail if I can.
I'm pretty sure that we've actually getting quotes for the demolition.
Right. And the neighbours have been told?
Yes, I understand they have, or they've been kept up to date with where the process is. We'll have to confirm exactly where it's at.
Right. Now, we've got LPS 7 going through the state government at the moment. It's been suggested to me that some of the last changes that the council made to that draft document to change the zonings of the Manning Men's Shed and Senior Citizens there has saved those sites from being sold to developers. Now, my question is, my understanding was that that was Crown land and that the city had paid for construction of those buildings for senior citizens. So were the changes to zoning there needed or likely to protect those sites from being sold off to developers?
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So I would need to double check, but my understanding is that those sites were proposed to be rezoned to public purposes for community use, because there's a requirement for the city to, when it's preparing its draft local planning schemes, to reflect the land use on the site when it comes to community purpose buildings. I can double check that zoning and provide a further response.
And those sites are Crown land?
Yes.
And my final set of questions relates to the $20 million that the Commonwealth had allocated for the City of South Perth I think from the Women's Sports Participation and Pools program, which was intended to be part of funding for indoor sports courts and a pool for the city of South Perth. And noting that the council has decided to not proceed with that facility of a pool and indoor sports courts, has anything actually been built for the city of South Perth out of that $20 million?
Ms Anne Primo, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city wrote to the federal government asking if the funds could be reallocated to another project as per the council resolution. To date, we haven't had no response as to whether or not they will allow us to spend that on a different project. Our current funding agreement has we're obviously in breach of that, and we can't simply spend the money on another project without approval.
So nothing's been built with the money so far?
No, nothing.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Could the city please give us an update on LPS 7? Thank you.
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a meeting scheduled with the Statutory Planning Committee of the West Australian Planning Commission to consider the matter on the, I believe it's mid-October. And after that point in time, it will then be referred to the Minister for final approval. That report to the Statutory Planning Committee will be confidential because all local planning schemes are confidential when they're presented to the WAPC.
And for the benefit of the community, could the city please explain the schedule or a lack of schedule with respect to the Minister's approval?
Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, are you referring to the timeline in terms of when it can be considered? Yes, so the West Australian Planning Commission has 90 days to consider the scheme once it's been referred to them. The meeting, which is actually scheduled for the 24th of October at this point in time, would exceed the 90-day statutory timeframe. There's no statutory timeframe in the regulations for the Minister to consider the scheme.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillors, any further questions? No. Okay. In that case, we move on to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That is nil. Item 15 is ordinarily where we would close the meeting to the public, but there's no reason for us to do that this evening, so nil. But before I close the meeting at item 16, I do note that this is the last meeting for Councillor Ken Manolis and Councillor Nick Warland. I would like to thank both of you on behalf of the City of South Perth for your service to this community. And we know you won't be strangers, but we wish you all the best for the future going forwards. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation this evening. I declare this meeting closed at 6:34 p.m. Thank you all and good night.